All right, ladies and gentlemen, can you all hear me back there? Yes, okay. So you've had a whole day of servant leadership and servant leadership related things. And your head should be getting full, but we also hope your heart is getting full, because the head and the heart go together with servant leadership. It's very, very important that you remember that. I wanted to say before I went into the session on listening, I wanted to say publicly how grateful I am to be here for the thankful, wonderful opportunities I've had with Sigrun and the members of the Greenleaf team. And they really do deserve a thank you, a clap. I mean, they're amazing. They work so hard, and you never see all the action that goes on. But they've all been wonderful to me and to my husband. And I also want to thank the rector for the hospitality that's been shown to us here, the people in the kitchen, the people in the offices, the super technology guy. Oh, he's amazing. And I mean, all the people here have just been superb to us. And I wanted to pass that on to you, because oftentimes we forget to say it at the end. And one little thing I wanted to mention to you, yes, it's our 4th trip here to Iceland. We love Iceland. And 2 years ago, I know some of you know this, but 2 years ago, our son and his new wife were married here at the Blue Lagoon. So we have a huge investment here. And their wedding pictures show them with the Icelandic flag. So this is very, very special to us, Iceland. And I just think you've got such wonderful possibilities here. You've got such powerful goodness here. And I really encourage you to try to work at the servant leadership, work at some of those characteristics, and work together, because in togetherness is the strength. Well, you know that because of your country. Togetherness is your strength. Right? Okay, so now we look at listening. When we put the list up this morning, when I put it up there for you, I had, the first word was listening. Do you remember? The first word was listening. And it is the most important thing for sure. Okay, which one? This one. No. Yep. Yes. Good. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all the reading. You can read this yourselves. But we wanted to emphasize the fact that servant leadership is a philosophy. It's 24/7. It's 7 days a week. If you're in it, you're in it. If you're not, you're not. And I said this to some of the graduate students here. It's like being pregnant. Either you are or you're not. Okay? So that's the way it is with servant leadership. If you buy into it today, that's it. You go for it. And I have been studying servant leadership since 1980. I still make lots of mistakes. I'm still on the journey. The journey never finishes, people. It's a lifelong journey to be a servant leader. We all make mistakes. Servant leaders are human, and you must remember that. And you know, there's lots of them in this room. And there's some of your parents, your mothers, your grandmothers, your dads, people that you know in your towns. They're servant leaders. So start watching the people around you and watch for those characteristics that we listed this morning. And I also wanted to mention that I noticed that there were some books brought in today. I know that Sigrun had some of the servant leadership books brought in, and they're going to be there when you go out today at the end if you're interested in getting any of them. And I looked at them all, and they were wonderful, because I've got them all, except for one, which I bought today. And so I encourage you to do that too. All right. It remains a conceptual idea unless it's applied. So we can all talk about servant leadership, but until you really try it, until you really do it, then you just don't really know it. All right? And I'll tell you the story that I told my grad students with Sigrun the other day. And it's not a story I'm proud of, but it's a story that makes the point. One of the things that Greenleaf says about his test is, do those served, okay? Are they better off than they were before? They're not harmed. Remember what I said this morning? Do no harm. When I lived in the city of Ottawa, which is the capital city in Canada, I used to go to the market with my husband to buy groceries on Saturday morning. But when I got down there, there were all sorts of homeless people and druggies shooting up in their arm, and I didn't like it. So I'd say, no, we're not going down there. I'll go the other way. I don't want to look at that. Then I moved to Winnipeg, Manitoba, or as we call it, Winterpeg, Manitoba, where the temperature can be minus 51 below, no kidding. And there's a street area called Portage in Main, which is a big cross-section in the city of Winnipeg. And a lot of the homeless people are down there. A lot of the drug addicts are down there, prostitutes, etc. And during the winter time, they lay on the grates where the heat comes through. But sometimes the heat isn't too strong when it's minus 51. And so they freeze to death. So when we would go downtown to Portage in Main, I would say to my husband, you know what I'm going to say? I'm not going down there. I'm not going to walk by those people. Why don't they get a job? Why don't they get a life? Well, then we moved to Paradise, Victoria, British Columbia, where the temperatures are mild and the flowers are growing. And everybody wants to go to Victoria because it's so nice. So we're going downtown in Victoria, and guess what I see? And they're all over the place, even more of them than there were in the other two cities. And I went back to University of Victoria, and I went into my office, and I'm sitting in front of my computer. And I'm thinking, Carolyn, you got a problem. You're in denial. You won't acknowledge what's there. You won't look at the humanity that's there. It could happen to anybody if things go wrong. You all know that. You're nodding your heads. Sure, life happens, doesn't it? So I made up in my mind that I had to deal with that problem, and I never said anything to my husband. I just decided that on the Saturday morning, when I wasn't at university, I was going to walk down 4th Street, which is one of the main streets, and the first homeless person I saw, I was going to speak to them. I was going to look them right in the eyes. I was going to acknowledge their humanness. And I was just shaking like a leaf. My stomach was shaking, my hands were shaking, but I got out there on the Saturday morning and I walked down 4th Street, and I hadn't gone even a block. And there was a guy cross-legged on the ground with his cap in front of him, and he said, "Any change? Any change?" And I looked at him and I said, "No, but good morning." And I walked on. And when I walked on, I felt incredible. I felt like 2 bricks had been taken off of my shoulders. And I just thought, from then on, I am going to acknowledge these people. And to this day, I do. Sometimes I give them money, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I give them money and I get ripped off. So that's life. But I do it. And in my own way, I am trying to say, I see you there. You are a human being and I recognize you there. So that to me is very, very important in the whole idea of servant leadership. And I really wanted to share that with you because we have so many people in need in the world that we have to really recognize that. Its reward remains undiscovered until they are experienced. That's the last sentence up there. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It remains unrewarded until you do something. Oops, there we are. So we're looking at listening. And as Margaret said, we are crummy listeners. We say we're wonderful listeners. We're not. We're not. We're thinking about what we want to answer. You know, and we're thinking about what we're getting for dinner. We're thinking about, oh, you got to get gas in the car. You know, you got to pick the kids up. But you're not thinking about the moment. Be in the moment. Be here now. You are with me now. This is our moment. This moment will never come again. We have to use this moment. We have to suck everything out of this moment. And it's exhausting. To really listen is exhausting. Think about that. But what do people really want? They want you to listen to them, especially if you're dealing with young people. They'll say, you're not being fair. You don't care what I think. You're not listening to me. They want you to listen. You don't have to agree. Just listen. And listen to each other. So Greenleaf says there's actually 4 stages to listening. You listen to yourself. What do you hear? You listen to someone else. What do you hear? So Greenleaf puts the question to you, and I put this question to you now. This is a serious question. Where are you now? What kind of a person are you? What do you really stand for? How far could someone push you? Would you break your values and your beliefs? Do you have prejudices? We all do. Nobody wants to admit it. It's our dirty little secret. But we all have prejudices. And we need to know what those prejudices are and try to work at them. Work with them. Try to deal with them. But be honest about it. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. So you listen to yourself. Now, everybody does it differently. Some people go for a run. They're in the moment. They're in there, and they're just listening to themselves. Or they listen to music. Or they, as one of my friends here does, goes in the pool in the morning and just floats there. Life is good. Okay? She's floating in that water. Okay? Or, you can just sit in silence, which I do. Everybody's running around with their little fingers going on. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay, there's one plugged in right there. Okay, you're doing that, and you got the wires in the ears. We need to take time from that. We need to take time from that. We owe it to ourselves. You have to honor yourself. You've earned the right to be honored. You've earned it. So take the time for yourself. That's really important. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Okay, so this is not something you don't know. Whoops. There we go. You heard me mention this morning about healing. About healing. Listening is a healing. Whatever life we have experienced, we can tell someone our story. We find it easier to deal with our circumstances. I have seen the great healing power of good listening so often that I wonder if you've noticed it also. Telling our stories. I've been here, in 10 days, I will have been here 7 weeks. 7 weeks where I have gone across the southern part, I think, of Iceland, and I have listened to people tell me their stories. Men and women in Iceland telling me their whole life story. And they're amazing stories. They're just amazing stories of survival, of living in an isolated place, but just working so hard. And we need to tell those stories to each other. You need to hear those stories. I shared with you a teeny little bit about Benedictson this morning. Her story's amazing. Every kid in Iceland should know the story of Margaret Benedictson, male or female. They should know that story. It's a story of bravery and of change. Servant leaders respond to the problem first by listening. So when someone comes to you with a problem, don't shut them down. Let them talk. Let them get it out. Let them get it out. A servant leader listens earnestly and speaks effectively. You seek first to understand, then to be understood. Now, if any of you know Stephen Covey, those are his words. Okay? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listens receptively to others, demonstrates a genuine interest, warmth, and respect. Not someone coming up to you at work and they're trying to tell you something and you're saying, yeah, right, yeah, yeah, okay, good, yeah. You know what I mean? Okay, how does that make you feel? Exactly. Listens honestly and deeply to oneself and invites feedback from others. Now, I can't remember which speaker it was this morning that put up the slide, but it talked about disagreements, that there needs to be disagreements in an organization, and that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. You need to have people change ideas and exchange ideas. And we're human beings. We're not all going to agree. So you need to have that, we call it dissonance in English, okay? This dissonance with people to sort of bring you new ideas. So don't be afraid of that. The most important part is that when you hear these dissonant ideas, you're respectful, you acknowledge it, and you can say, I don't agree, that's okay, but in a respectful way. You know, not a, oh, that's stupid. You know, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that, okay? And you have to start when people are very young, when children are young, because they're very susceptible to that kind of language and so on. Listens honestly and deeply to oneself and invites feedback. I'm repeating that again. You have to be invitational. You have to encourage people to talk to you. If any of you work in a business, you need to invite that feedback. Talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. What could we do around here to make it better? Okay? So just ask. Be active listening. Listen to your colleagues and their interpretations, their stories, what they find meaningful in their work. Always transforms our relationships. Servant leadership is all about relationships. It's all about relationships. Don't ever forget that. It's critical. The art of listening always brings us closer. We may not like the person. Well, that's life, isn't it, okay? We may not like the person or approve of their behavior, but if we listen, we've moved past the labels. And here's the most important one, and I was going to save this for the very last few, but I'm going to say it now. When we listen to a person, we honor them with our time. We value them by this act. Do you realize that today you have honored all the speakers that came up here? You've sat there politely and you've listened to them. You've honored them. You've said, you're worth it. You're worth it. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you. And that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. And you see, that's how I feel. I said this morning when I started, it was a privilege to be here. Absolutely a privilege to be here. Because you're sitting there and you're honoring me by sitting there. It makes me feel darn good. Yeah. So ask yourself, do I get nervous when no one is speaking? How can I improve my comfort with silence? Am I willing to center myself to bring full presence to a conversation? Let's be in the moment. So I can be fully at home in it? How can I do that? Can you just be quiet? One of the things that I'm well known for, when I was an administrator at university, and I'm no longer an administrator, thank you, been there, done that, I would sit in a meeting, and I still do actually, and I let people just talk and talk. And I don't say anything. And usually the dean will say, Carolyn, don't you have anything to say? And I'll say, I'm listening. I'm listening. But when I do have something to say, they listen. You get what I'm saying? Okay. We are all chatty Cathys. Yeah. Okay? We don't like silence. We get a little twisted with it, you know? Get a little twitchy. And I remember many years ago when I taught little children, when I taught grade 2, 7-year-olds, and I'd ask a question, and no one would put their hand up. I think, blew that one. Failed. They don't understand. I messed it up. But now I know that everybody needs a little bit of think time. And some people think faster than others. And we have to recognize that and acknowledge that. So that's all part of listening too. Some ideas to include, if you're nervous about listening. Take 3 deep breaths. Remove distractions. Shift into heightened awareness of the other person's body posture. Okay? Is a person uptight? You can tell by the way they're standing there or sitting there. Are they darting around with their eyes? Are they all getting twitchy? You know, what's going on there? Use of language and emotional nuances. Be kind to people. We need to be kind. There's so much meanness out there. Barbara Colarasso, she's a speaker in the States. She's been around a long time. And Barbara says, we've got a culture of mean. M-E-A-N. We're building a culture of mean. Sarcastic, condescending, nasty comments to people. She said, that's got to stop. And we look at what's going on with our social media. There's your culture of mean. Sharing circles. Now, I'm sure you've all been in circles where you talk. And what this research is telling us is that sharing circles are good. They bring you actually physically closer. You move in physically when you're in a circle. You don't even know it, but you do. Your body moves in. You shift in. And that itself is a positive thing because you're closing that space, aren't you? You're connecting more with people. So every person has a somewhat different perspective by virtue of individual differences, and also because we each live in a different part of the organization or community. The world doesn't look exactly the same to any two people. And a circle provides the form together many perspectives without as much judgment or defensiveness. Here's the benefits of listening. Good listeners are created as people feel listened to. Listening is a reciprocal process, back and forth, back and forth. Listening brings people together. You can see this happening physically, as I said, in a circle. And as we listen, we develop greater awareness that each of us is human, struggling with life's challenges. Be silent, be still. Last story. I was teaching a July class at the University of Victoria, must have been 7 or 8 years ago. And there were a lot of students in that class. 25, 30 students in this little room. And it was Monday morning. And the class came in, they were wired. They were full of noise. And they'd been out running around all weekend. And they were just so full of themselves. And I was up at the front getting my things together. And there was just a terrible noise. But I just ignored it and went on to get my things ready for the class. Now, there was one little student, and I say little. She's a little gal from Vietnam. And I tell you, she was just, you think I'm short? You should have seen her. She was really short, okay? Her name was Chrissy. And Chrissy was just a tiny little thing. And Chrissy was in the front of the class. And all this noise going on. And I'm at the front, not paying any attention. And all of a sudden, Chrissy jumps out of her seat. I can still see her. Jumps out of her seat and turns to the class. And she says, be silent, be still. And everybody was. I mean, this was Chrissy, for crying out loud, So they were very, very quiet. And I said, thank you, Chrissy. We really appreciate that. I said, how do you feel, people? Do you want to just take maybe a minute to sort of get ourselves centered here? Oh, yeah, that was okay. So we all just sort of, put our heads down and closed our eyes to block out any of the extraneous stuff. I don't know, maybe 15 seconds or so. It wasn't very long that we did this, and then we went ahead with the class. Now, at the end of the class was the significant part. Everybody was getting up to leave, and there was one guy at the back. He was over on this side. I can still see it. And he came up, and he said, Dr. Crippen, I really like that. I said, you really like what? He said, I really like that quiet time, that sitting in silence thing. Do you think we could do that every class? And I said, well, we'll check with the class. So the next class, I put the question to them, and they all said, yeah, sure, let's try it. So by the end of the summer session, we were up to about 15 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes of sitting in silence before we started to learn. Amazing. And now the secret is that with all my classes, all of them, servant leadership, organizational theory with Morgan's book that I saw up here, Garrett's book, all those classes, we start by sitting in silence. Let's just get our heads on straight, I'm saying to them. Let's just get in the moment with each other. Let's really focus on what we're about here, because we're only here for a little while tonight, and we don't want to waste that time, so let's do that. And it seems to work. It seems to work, not just with my servant leader students, and I teach 3 courses in that, but with everybody now. So like in my own little way, I'm sort of planting the seeds. least I'm trying to, about thinking, pondering, and being in the moment. So I hope this will help you think a little bit about your listening and working at it. And as I said, it's very tiring to really do it well. So you've got to practice, practice, practice. Thank you very much. Got to do the little boxes. And I haven't got my mic here, but I also brought my business cards. Now, I've seen so many people in Iceland now, there's not enough for everybody, I'm sorry. Because everybody wants a card, they don't care. But I'll give them out. Take one if you want it. I'm not offended if you don't want one. It's fine with me. And on the back of it is the important stuff. Not the stuff on the front. It's the back that's the important stuff. So I'll pass that down here. Thank you. And are we ready for this? Now, if you got one this morning, you can't have another. You don't want any greedy goose. Okay, no greedy goose. So I'm going to start at the back, because they sort of got shortchanged. Are we ready? Are we ready? Here we go. Pay attention. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Last one. There we go. All right. That's it.
Carolyn, we are all impressed. Thank you so much for reminding us of the thing we always forget, that is listening. We have time for one question, not much more, before we invite the rector of Bifröst University. But before that, I would like to thank you, Sigrún, especially because I'm really impressed by the way you selected the speakers today, by the way you balanced the program and bringing in so different points of view. One question from the audience, yes?
Thank you for the most enlightening and inspiring presentation. Canada is a unique country. I happen to have, and the people, I happen to have been able to visit the country many times. It's unique in many respects, and also because the government support the ethnic groups and support them and encourage them to keep their identity. Has there any research being done what kind of ethnic groups are more receptive to the ideas you are presenting here, or even religion? Has there anything been studying on that? What kind of people, what is the background of the people? Because I understand in Canada, about 50% of the population is born outside Canada.
I deal with a huge population of international students. A huge population. Out of a class of maybe 15, I would have 8 to 9 students international. From China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, a lot of the Pacific Rim. But I don't have any from Iceland, and I would love to have students from Iceland. And as Margaret said, it is a beautiful campus, one of the most beautiful campuses in the world, truly, and I'm just so grateful to be there. So you've got my card, and I make this invitation to you, and a sincere invitation. If you want to know anything about this more that you can't find, if you want to just learn about where you can come to get information at UVic, anything to do with servant leadership or just life in general, write me. I will write you back. I have thousands of people that write me, and I love it. It's such a privilege to stay connected in the world. So I do invite you to do that.